Austin Matthews signing for 8 years. Sheldon Keith saying Luke Schenn possibly not signing with the Maple Leafs. A lot has happened in the last few days. A few days ago, I made a video talking about Luke Schenn, and it seemed like at that point he was going to re-sign with the Maple Leafs. On the show, Donnie and Dolly, the team, Rick Dollywall, talked a little bit about Luke Schenn and the fact that it really looked like at that point he was going to remain in Toronto. Schenn was a really good piece they added at the trade deadline. He was really passionate about being a Maple Leaf, and at the same time, a lot of fans loved him. A lot of fans loved his play, his personality. He was one of the best defensemen on the Maple Leafs in the playoffs this past year, and I'm sure, without a doubt, that Toronto would love to bring him back. Dollywall said that they were in talks about a contract, but the latest doesn't give me any hope that they could have a deal in place by July 1st. Once again from Rick Dollywall, he says this on his show, Donnie and Dolly, the team. Luke Schenn and the Maple Leafs are not close, as I was told, to a contract. Keep an eye on him if he hits free agency. Let's see if this happens. This doesn't sound like the best news, and if you're a Maple Leafs fan, you might be wondering, why is it slow on contract talks? Why is this not working out? And you look at the type of deal he might want. He might want a lot of term, a lot of AAV, maybe 1.5 to 2 million in that range. And the Leafs might only want to give him $1 million for maybe a year, or if they want to go longer term, maybe $1 million each year. I don't know what's the holdup here, but if there's a point where the Leafs and Luke Schenn want to come together and they want to be a duo that can really work a thing out like a contract, it's got to happen soon, and I believe it has to happen before free agency. Because if you think about it, you open that door for Schenn to go to free agency, other teams are going to be offering him a lot of money, I think, for his services. A lot of people would hand out that money, and the Leafs, as they are a little bit tighter, they're not as tight as past years to the cap. They can still throw a little bit more money at Schenn, I believe. I think that, again, this has to happen before July 1st, and if not, they're losing, or they're risking the chance of losing him to another team. And I don't think you can lose a guy like Luke Schenn after the way he played in the playoffs to another team. This Leafs team needs some good defensemen, and I think you look at Schenn as one of the pieces that could push this team, maybe not over the top, but closer to the top, and just be able to help, whether it be on the ice or in the locker room. Now, though, with the possibility of Schenn leaving, it looks like another person is here to stay for this year and possibly the next few years. From TSN's Darren Dreger, Brad Treliving and Sheldon Keith are well into interviewing candidates to replace Spencer Carberry. Treliving and Keith spent time getting to know each other as soon as Treliving was hired as GM. No extension for Keith yet, but those discussions are expected to happen this summer. This is an interesting turn of events because, as we know, at the press conference where Treliving was introduced as GM, he talked a little bit about Sheldon Keith and really not knowing whether or not Keith would return. Treliving said he would need to go in and really look at Keith's resume, look at what he's done as a coach, and then really decide what's going to happen. And those discussions with Keith, it looks like, seem to be very good and very positive, because it looks as though Keith is going to remain here, and if they're looking at an extension for Keith too, it looks like he could be possibly here for the next few years. I did talk about Keith in another video, looking at his record, his playoff record, his regular season record, and just whether or not it would be worth bringing him back. I'll put the link to that up here. You should be able to see that right now. And while you're at it, make sure to hit the subscription button if you are enjoying these videos. Make sure to leave a like, and if you already are subscribed, hit the bell so you get a notification on every video. The one thing I wonder, though, about Keith and Treliving interviewing candidates for an assistant coaching job is, who could that be? I wonder if names will come out in the next few days about who's gotten an interview with this club. I mean, I've said it in another video, I believe it was the last one again, I would love to see Bruce Boudreau behind the bench. That would be funny. It would be good. It could be a good thing for the Maple Leafs. That would obviously be something that would have to be looked at if he was to be brought in. But there are a lot of coaches. Maybe Patrick Waugh comes in as an assistant coach. I highly doubt that, but that's a name that would be very, very, very interesting. And yeah, it's going to be, again, fascinating to see who the Leafs go with here and who Sheldon Keith would elect to bring in as a bench boss who will stand right beside him during games. I think, though, one of the things I do want to say about Keefe is that he was a coach that got the Leafs past the first round for the first time since 2004. Now, obviously, he's not the guy who got them past, but he was a part of that. And I think there's something special there. I think there's something that's going to be really good about that. And if you want to get rid of a guy like that, it's going to send a shock into the locker room. And I think a shock's already came about with Dubas getting let go. So I think this is a good thing to bring Keefe back. It's going to tell a lot about whether or not he is the right coach for this team. And the first part of the season is really going to show if he can be the one that will help guide this team. And then the playoffs will also show whether or not he is the right fit for this Toronto Maple Leafs team. Brad Treliving, though, it's safe to say has been really, really busy ever since he became the Leafs GM. You talk about the Keefe stuff, you talk about Luke Schenn and those negotiations, let alone all the other negotiations, but he also went out and visited Austin Matthews in Arizona, not to talk contract, but just to get to have them know each other a little bit before really getting down to the negotiation part of this process. Because as you may know, Austin Matthews can re-sign on July 1st. He can't as of yet, but on July 1st, he can sign an extension of any length with an AAV of whatever he might probably want, because I think he holds the cards here. He is the one who's driving the bus at this point in his career. He can elect to leave, he can elect to stay, and I've heard, and everyone has heard, really, that he wants to stay. He said it in his final press conference of the season this year, and it just seems like he wants to stay. So with that being said, there's a big deal about this contract and whether or not he's going to re-sign for 8 years or 3 years or whatever that may be. On Friday's edition of 32 Thoughts, the podcast, though, Elliot Friedman and Jeff Merrick talked a little bit about this exact thing. And Friedman said that he's more convinced now that Austin Matthews is signing, which, again, at least to me, I was always convinced that he would re-sign. You just look at how much he loves the city of Toronto. It was clear, but he also dropped a little tidbit about maybe Matthews takes an 8-year deal rather than a shorter-term deal, which is a very interesting thing because nobody has talked about that. No reporter, nothing has said maybe the Leafs will get him at an 8-year deal. And if this actually does happen, the Leafs are in very good condition. The Leafs obviously are going to push really hard on this, and I think there might be a little bit of thought from Matthews on this, but I'm going to talk about why I think he shouldn't sign this deal. And this is a very unpopular opinion because I tweeted it yesterday and not many people agreed with me. I really don't think anyone did. From the Maple Leafs perspective and the fans' perspective, this makes 100% to lock Matthews up for 8 years. You get him on this Maple Leafs team until he's 34 years of age. You have a contract that has an AAV that would be as good as it is right now in 4 or 5 or 6 or 7 or 8 years whenever his contract would end. And what I mean by that is that the fact that this AAV, whatever he signs, is going to be the exact same AAV that it is in, I'm so bad, 2023. He signs in 2031. So if he signs until 2031, the cap is going to rise, obviously, exponentially. It's going to rise next year. Maybe it's $3 million. I'm not sure about that, but it's going to rise. And they're going to have a really good thing here with Austin Matthews if they can get him locked up to an 8-year deal. But to Austin Matthews' side, it just doesn't make sense for him to re-sign for 8 years in Toronto. Now, this is not saying he doesn't like Toronto, because he does, and we all know it. Again, I said it earlier on in the video. He said it, everyone believes it, he loves Toronto. But at the same time, he's got to fight for how much money he's going to make. That's a player's for everything. For every player, they got to fight for the maximum amount of money they can earn, because at the end of the day, it's like a job. If you have a job and you want to get paid a lot of money, you're going to fight for that. In contract negotiations, you're going to shoot for the stars, and it might not get to the stars, but you're going to get a lot of money. And that's what matters to you. That's what matters to your family and everything like that. So when Austin Matthews goes into these negotiations, instead of going for an 8-year deal at, say, $14 million, $13 million, Austin Matthews could say, hey, I want to sign a 3-year deal at $14 million. And by that point, by the time this contract is up, it's going to be where the cap has risen to a point where I can earn more money. And he's going to make, possibly, if he does do that, $15 million plus on the next deal that he signs. And it's not to say he doesn't like playing in Toronto, or it's not that he doesn't enjoy playing in Toronto. It's just the fact that this would make sense for him. This would make sense for his family. This would make sense for his situation. And to me, for a player, that's all that matters. It's both sides. It's the Leafs would love to get him at 8 years, but Auston Matthews might say, hey, I could still sign here for 3 years and then sign a 4-year deal after that, which would make him a lot more money. It's not to say he's not going to sign here. It's not to say that he doesn't enjoy it. It's the fact that he wants to make the most money he can, and that way, he's going to do that. I told you, it's not a popular opinion, but it's one that makes sense for him, and it does make sense for both sides at the same time with the cap rising. If he really, really nails down that he wants to remain in Toronto, then it makes sense. He's not going to leave. If he does leave, then it'll be after the 3 years, and maybe they'll have a cup by then. Who knows? But to me, to the player's side, that just makes the most sense. But what do you think about that? It's a hot topic. Do you think he should sign an 8-year deal? If you're a fan of the team, I'm sure you do. But do you see my side of it? Do you see that, if you were the one in his shoes, you would push for the maximum amount of money? Let me know what you think in the comment section down below, because again, it's a raging hot topic right now. But yeah, that is all the news that I've had for the past 2 days. I meant to get a video out yesterday on this. Spilt water on my keyboard while I was making a thumbnail, and the keyboard went berserk. So I have it out today. I know it's a little bit later, but it is what it is. Also, the fact that there was news that Justin Holl, Michael Bunting, and Alex Kerfoot are likely not to be back. I think there's still a little bit of a door open for Bunting, but as it seems right now from reports, Michael Bunting will be close to coming back, possibly. There's a possibility still there, but Justin Holl and Alex Kerfoot will not return. Out of the three, I think Bunting is the one who would provide the most value to the Maple Leafs, which is why I believe the door would still be open for him. In terms of Kerfoot, I think should be a new change of scenery for him, as with Justin Holl, because those two guys were really just, they did not get the love from the fans, and I'm not sure whether they saw that or not. If they did, it was probably hard on them. If they didn't, I mean, they're hockey players. I would understand if you didn't take to social media, but at the end of the day, those two guys need a change of scenery. Michael Bunting could use a change of scenery, but it would also be nice for Toronto to get him back. So that's all the news today. I want to thank you all so much for watching. If you did enjoy the video, make sure to leave a like and subscribe as well, because that helps a lot to show me that you're liking the content on these videos. And yeah, if there's any more Leafs news, or I might make a video on who to bring back from these UFAs that are leaving the Maple Leafs. I might make a video specifically on Noel Acciari. I've made Luke Schenn. I've talked about Ryan O'Reilly, Michael Bunting. Justin Holl, again, is not going to be there. Kerfoot, not going to be there, but I'll see what happens here, and I'll have a video out soon. But again, thank you so much for watching. We'll see you in the next video. Maybe by the next video, Auston Matthews is re-signed, because Elliot Friedman said on 32 Thoughts, 3 days after Jonathan Huberdeau had a meeting in Montreal or in Quebec with Brad Treliving, he signed a deal. Now, obviously, it's been longer than that at this point, as Elliot Friedman reported, but it's always possible. So maybe my next video will be Auston Matthews resigns. We'll see you in the next one.